What's up everybody, I'm LEMAN and today I want to break down my new track You So Cold, which is now out on HELLBENT Records. HELLBENT Records is one of my all-time favorite tech house labels and that's why this release means a lot to me. I've been working with Mike for the last few years and he asked me to hop on his channel and to show you guys how I produce my track. So let me first show you a small part of the track.
So cold, never had no sun, you don't
Let's dive into the details. So I typically create more percussion heavy tracks, so my track needs a solid foundation and a nice groove. And if you feel like your kick doesn't cut through the mix, you can think about layering your kick. And that's what I did in this track. I sampled a kick transient from a reference track and layered it with a normal kick. So here's the kick without a second layer. And now with the transient layer. I also used the saturator on the transient kick, so to get more grit out of it. So for the bass, you oftentimes hear put your low end into mono, and that's a rule that I also follow. But I usually add a mid bass layer to give the bass more stereo width and more presence. So on this white mid layer, I'm using the hyper dimension in Serum to make the patch wider. Let me show you with and without. So it's still a bass sound, and that's why I'm cutting the frequencies below 150 Hz, so it doesn't interfere with the sub bass. And here's the sub bass and the mid bass together. So for my mixing chain, I'm using kickstart at the front of the chain to duck the frequencies when the kick is playing. R bass for saturation. Then I'm boosting the highs on the at around 200 and above. I'm also boosting quite heavy at 50 Hz and at 84 Hz. Then later in the chain, I'm using the glue compressor to compress a little bit of the peaks. Also using a saturator and a limiter to get the bass a consistent level. And with this Pro Q, I'm cutting the frequencies above 250 Hz. And at the end, I'm using another side chain, which is routed to the kick. And here's what it sounds together. Let's get over to the drums, and that's the part that I enjoy the most when I'm starting a track. Next to the classic clap and hi-hat, I'm also using a lot of perk sounds. These sounds give the track the groove and the vibe. And let me show you the drum without all the perks and tops, and then with them. So sometimes my drums feel a little bit flat in the mix. So if you're using sample without any reverb on it, you can think about putting a reverb layer to your drums. And that's what I did on the basic bass, so on the clap and hat. So I'm using this layer, this short reverb, to give the clap and hat a little bit of dimension. When it comes to the perks and to the tops, you can definitely use loops. That's what I'm also doing to stack up the frequencies. For the perk groove, I chopped different perk hits from loops and added a few more single hits from my favorite perk rack that I'm using in all of my productions to get the sound more like me. So as you can see, I was chopping out these parts from a different loop and then the next part, and together they give the nice groove, the nice perk groove. And this is the rack I'm using. I have different perk samples in it, and I'm creating my own MIDIs out of it. And then I'm also using a sidechain bus over here. The perk groove and the tops grooves, or the tops bus, are routed into the sidechain bus, and they are getting sidechained to the kick and the open hat to get those two samples more pop out of the mix. So let's get over to the most important part, the hooks. Typically, I don't use a lot of synth sounds in my tracks. I'm using vocal samples and hip-hop sounds, or I search for every kind of sounds that fit the vibe. And as you can see, the musical part, that's the green stuff, plays a huge role in my breaks. Not as much in the drops. And let me show you the sounds I'm using in this track. So we have the pad sound over here, which is creeping up in the build-up. Then I'm using another string sound, which has a nice vocal chop in it. Kinda liked it. Then those white chord steps, which are also creeping up in the build-up. Then I have another sample that drags you into another section. It's like a horn step. Then that's nearly it. I have some reverse sounds, which also drags you or is assigned for next phrase to begin or next part of the track. And that's it for the break. I'm reusing those white chords in the drop with a lower octave layer. Let me show you. Just some small hits in the second part of the drop. Yeah, that's it. I'm not using a lot of sounds over here. Just at the end of each, let's say 8 bars or 16 bars to drag the listener into the next section. And for the most part, the samples aren't that processed because when they fit the vibe, I don't need to cut or play around with them that much. Using, as you can see, the saturator to give it more grit on the group channel, also on the music bus channel, and a little bit of reverb. And that's it. Yeah, and let's dive into the vocals, the most interesting part in this track. I found a nice sample in the Nuzzo sample pack. Shout out to the guys from Nuzzo. They created a beautiful sample pack. Also using a lot of their samples, especially their drums, perks, and tops, and so on. And I just found this nice vocal sample.
Wanna grow up, yeah, the shit no fun, so.
And when it comes to mixing your vocals, it's not that hard, to be honest. It depends how good the quality is of the sample, but I usually use the same chain in every track. So I have a chain loaded up directly into my vocal channel. I start with a side chain, then I'm using another side chain as a de-esser, an EQ, some dynamic moves to cut some frequencies, and again to cut some lows. Then I'm using a free plugin that's called Fresh Air, a saturator that gives a nice grit to the vocal, a nice air presence. Then some compressor to maintain a specific level of volume. A limiter, a saturator that is used as a kind of limiter and that I'm pushing into the limiter. And then another side chain to the kick. And then I have a vocal chain, which is like the dry channel, white ping pong delay, mono delay, slap delay to give it more width, a short reverb, and sometimes a long reverb, especially in the breaks when I try to create an atmosphere. But that's it. And when you see that you're using over and over the same plugins, just create a rack out of it, save it as a default rack or load it up when you need to use it, and you're ready to go. It looks like a lot, but it's not that much. And at the end of the chain, you see like a delay for the main break and build, also reverb to grow the atmosphere, and also created a filter rack to dark some frequencies to do like a low pass or a high pass filter. Then for the break, I'm using the same vocal but a small part to create a repetitive vocal kind of thing for the background, which is growing up over time. It's kind of like a riser effect. I also repeat the original vocal at the end of the or right before the drop, and then it leads to the full vocal phrase over here. In the drop, I have a lot of small vocal chops going on. I oftentimes use a mixture between male and female vocal because you can create a cool interaction between different samples. Let me show you, let me play the support vocal chops all together so you can understand what I mean by interacting. And to make it more interesting and to give the vocal chops different spaces, you can put the vocal chops in, for example, it's one to the left, one to the right, one more front, or one in the back. And there's a cool preset on the Pro Q3 plugin, which is called Phone, which gives it, or which cuts the highs and the lows and gives a nice touch, a different touch when you compare it with and without. So as you can see, I'm routing different samples to different directions. So in total, you have a big stereo field of different sounds going on. Yeah, what's left? It's the FX bus. Those are my typical effects, like some white noises, like some rises, snare rolls. That's also something you can do in your, or you can create a template in Ableton or in your DAW. That's what I'm doing. When I load up a new project, I always have my go-to plugins, but also samples ready to go in the project, especially the effects or the some short white noises, rises that I typically use in every kind of track. Sure, from track to track, I'm switching things up, or I kind of feel like I need a different kind of riser, and I'm searching for it. But just to get the vibe going, just to have a solid foundation, you can use the effects over and over again. It's not that important in the track to waste your time, I would say, to search over and over for new samples in every new track. And what I also like to do is I'm using Endless Smile on the main channel. In this case, it's the pre-master bus where I'm doing the mastering stuff. So in the breaks, I'm automating the dry wet on the Endless Smile to make this one very happy. And I'm also created a gain rack. So as you can see, let's put it on. I'm lowering the gain in the main break, just at around 1 or 2 dB. And right before the drop, I give the volume back to make the drop more impactful. It's a small thing that you can do, but it works out pretty nicely, especially on the club speakers. So when it comes to mixing, the mixing secret that I think is the most important is finding the right space for each sound in your mix. So I also always think about the focus. So which element should be in focus at every single moment in your track. Especially in the breaks, you can play around with a lot of automation. As you can see, what I'm doing on the vocal right here, you can use a reverb automation, you can use a gain automation, you can use a filter automation to shift the focus, for example, from the vocal to the synth part, and vice versa. And with those automations, you can keep your track interesting. Alright, that's the breakdown of my new track, User Code. And if you like the track, you can click on the link in the description to get your copy or to stream it on your favorite platform. The track is out now as part of the Welcome to Hell compilation on HELLBENT Records. Also big shout out to ZERMELO for the invite. And if you want to level up your music production, check out his other YouTube videos or head over to school.com/ZERMELO. His production courses are absolutely worth it. Thanks for watching and peace!